rate, there was a character in Point Doom named Felix Duarte. And he is the driving force behind my new book that I'm working on called La Rumorosa. So I thought I'd read a little section of Point Doom that leads into the beginning of my new book. And it's the first time for me sort of doing this, so we'll see how it goes. Let's make sure everyone can hear Katie. Can you, is this good? Yes, that's it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Lucky, lucky Felix. His cousin Julio Soto made the offer of a lifetime. The cartel would bring him across the border safely, and in exchange he would work for them a few months in a grow site. Then he'd be free to either stay in the States or return home. They promised to pay $10,000, a fortune. This was finally the opportunity he needed to change his life. Violetta exploded in rage when Felix told her he was leaving to go work up north. She stamped her foot and shook her head, bull-like and mean. She had a volcanic temper, and there was always a danger that she might slug him if she got too wound up. Usually she went for his arm, hitting hard and leaving a bruise, but sometimes she'd get him in a headlock and pummel him so that his scalp was lumpy and sore for days. Once she hauled off and socked him in the nose. It didn't break, but he had a bad nosebleed and ruined one of his only good shirts. Violetta apologized that time, but that was the only time. She was never sorry about hurting him. And so now, while he explained to her his reasons for accepting this job, he was trying to keep as much distance as possible between them. They were standing in the living room of her parents' home. Violetta's father was the groundskeeper for the church and graveyard, and her mother did all the housekeeping for the priests. They were a relatively prosperous family. Felix thought that the father and mother didn't really approve of his relationship with Violetta. He was a poor boy without many prospects. But Violetta was a handful. For one thing, she was big, taller than most men, with meaty hands and feet. She weighed about 200 pounds. Felix liked big women. The stronger, the better. Most of the men he knew preferred little delicate things like his sisters, but as far as he was concerned, Violetta was the most beautiful woman on earth. There hadn't been a lot of suitors before he'd started courting her, and Felix suspected that this was why the parents tolerated a peasant like himself. Violetta balled her hands into tight fists. Her face was feverishly red. What about me? There was a lavender couch and matching armchairs in the middle of the room, arranged around a large TV that was tuned to one of the many daytime soap operas. The floor was a checkerboard of purple and green tiles and was always immaculately clean. There were paintings of the Lord Jesus on the walls and several religious icons on the coffee table. The couch and chairs were covered in thick, clear plastic to protect the upholstery. Felix stood behind the couch, ready to dart into the kitchen if need be, and Violetta was in front of the TV. If she wanted to hit him, she'd have to climb over the couch. Felix didn't think she'd do that. No one in the house would dream of putting their feet on the furniture. Traitor! Violetta was still talking in a harsh whisper because she didn't want her mother to hear, but Felix was pretty sure that screaming was just around the corner. Please, my love, Felix said. You probably think I'm going to wait for you. With both hands, she picked up a large ceramic statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe and pointed it at him like a battering ram. It's only 5 months. Felix was watching her closely. That particular Virgin was heavy. If she threw it and it hit his head, it could probably kill him. You know I love you. I'll bring you nice presents from Los Angeles or San Diego. Violetta started to raise the Virgin over her head. Marry me! Felix was just as shocked by these words as she was. He'd had no idea he was going to propose, but once he'd said it, it seemed like a pretty good idea. Why not? He loved her. I'll have money when I come back. We can start a life. Violetta transformed in an instant. All the anger disappeared. She had the most heartbreakingly beautiful dimples when she smiled. Felix felt his body relax. She replaced the statue on the table, came around the couch, and wrapped Felix in her strong, fleshy arms. He swooned as he sank into her body, warm and protected. He would miss her, miss his life here. But it was only temporary, and when he came back, they could live their lives together, always together. He nuzzled her mammoth breasts, inhaling her molasses scent, and felt himself ignite with desire. This was the most exciting woman he had ever known, and standing here with the pulse beating through his body, he knew he'd made the right decision. Okay, and so now this is from La Rumorosa, my new book in progress. And this chapter, which is the opening of the book, is called For You I Build a House. Violetta snatched the discarded newspaper off the bench and held it away from her until the images came into focus. 3 more bodies discovered, all men, decapitated with their genitals hacked off and stuffed into their mouths. She looked at the picture but felt nothing. This was now a normal occurrence in her world, part of everyday life. At the beginning, when the madness first started, the drug mafias just focused on the heads. Every week you'd read about a new head, or a couple of heads, then groups of heads. Heads in coolers delivered to the mayor's office or the governor. Heads on the hoods of cars with threatening messages scrawled in blood on the windshield. Heads on stakes in front of the police headquarters, eyes and ears removed. Heads on porches with their tongues cut out. One group made a big impression by rolling a whole bag of heads into the middle of the dance floor at a bar where Felix used to work. There were videos posted on the internet of heads being cut off and men in black hoods boasting their amazing strength and power. But then someone realized that they were cutting themselves short. Why not use the body too? It was so very wasteful to focus solely on the head, such a missed opportunity. Soon guys like the pozole maker were internationally famous for dissolving over 300 bodies in big vats of acid, human stew, cartel soup. You could find it everywhere, in vacant lots, on busy sidewalks, and twice at the intersection by the school where Violetta worked. Of course the vats got knocked over and the contents spilled. Decomposed body parts were lovingly photographed by every paper in the country, the bleached flesh and bones highlighted in the publications around the world. And then, not to be outdone, the pozole maker's boss, El Teo, rose to the top of the heap when he peeled the face off one of his enemies and sewed it onto a soccer ball. On that glorious day, no one was more famous than El Teo. Why did they put these pictures in the paper, Violetta wondered. Mutilated bodies, torsos with arms and legs removed, heads piled in a corner next to an old filing cabinet, limbs stacked like firewood. It just encouraged them. It was like a contest that nobody could win. Who could be more barbaric, cause the most damage? There seemed to be no limit to the evil. Everywhere, pools of black blood. So much blood. And always the images, like horror movies, blood and gore, only there was no hero, no happy ending. The headline mentioned something about Calderon's commitment to Mexico. Change was on the way. It was true, things were changing. Everything was getting worse. And this war had taken Felix hostage. Violetta was going to get him back. She put the paper down, squinted her eyes and looked down the street, trying to see if the bus was approaching. She really did need to get glasses so she could see things more clearly. It was hot, and the wind blew a dusty red. She felt the grit in her hair and teeth. The baking heat sucked the moisture from her body, and her shirt stuck to her back. There were rings under her arms and breasts, and she worried about her sweating thighs, leaving a mark on her skirt. She closed her eyes. Where was Felix today? A beach with black sand. No, white sand. He was barefoot, running along the water's edge, smiling. His hair was a little longer the way she liked it, parted on the right side and neatly combed. Felix always took care of his appearance. Today he was fishing. The sky was blue and there were brilliant white clouds scattered across the horizon. He had a fire going on the beach and there was a blanket on which sat a huge and delicious meal. Violetta cheered him on as he reeled in a huge fish, a tuna. No, it was a marlin with a sharp pointed bill and dramatic fin. Felix wrestled the thing to the sand. They would have their feast, feeding each other delicious morsels, then kiss as the sun went down. They would make love on that blanket and hold each other tight. When she got to California, she would stay close to the ocean. That's where he would be. She could feel it.